大家好，我是 Oliver Branch Dallin. So you may have heard of this word called HRV, or heart rate variability, from maybe social media channels or maybe your watch and your phone that has a wearable device that can track your HRV. So I'm going to tell you what it means and how you can interpret it to help you improve your health. Okay, so what is heart rate variability? Heart rate, we all know, is being represented as number of beats per minute. So let's just say an easy example is you have a 60 beats per minute. So you're thinking 1 beat per second. 1 second is also 1,000 milliseconds. So you might be thinking that your heart is beating once every 1,000 milliseconds. However, that's not really the case. Your heart may be beating at every 979 milliseconds, and then the next beat might be 1,017 milliseconds. So there's a bit of variation throughout that 60 seconds. And that variation is then put into a score, and that tells you your variability score, and that's your HRV. The higher the variance that is, the more balanced your nervous system is, specifically your autonomic nervous system. So your autonomic nervous system is broken down into two main branches, the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system. These are both autonomic, meaning they run automatically. You don't have much control over it. The sympathetic nervous system is in charge of your fight or flight response. That basically means when you've been excited and now you have a lot of energy to do something, either to run away because there's danger, there's a tiger, or to fight if there's a neighboring tribe that's fighting you. In this case, you have a lot of adrenaline that gets dumped into your bloodstream, and a lot of glucose gets broken down from the liver to give you energy for action. This is the sympathetic nervous system. Your heart rate and blood pressure both shoot up so that it supplies your muscles with lots of blood for action. Your parasympathetic nervous system is the opposite. It's for rest and recovery. And that's after a lot of exercise, your heart rate starts to come back down, and that's your parasympathetic nervous system taking over. Or after you had a large meal, you're digesting, or even when you're sleeping. This is all part of the parasympathetic nervous system. These two systems, as you know, in day-to-day life, should be in balance, right? You might have a spike of action, but then it always comes back down for you to rest and recover. And this finely tuned balance, this equilibrium, can actually be indicated by your heart rate variability. So when you have a low HRV, then that means that your sympathetic nervous system is overly dominant. You're in too much of an action state. You're constantly thinking of something that's going to be of threat. Conversely, having a higher HRV means that you have a very equal push and pull equilibrium between these two nervous systems. So an example of some mental stress that you might have is you could have something at work that's maybe a project that spans for multiple weeks or even months, and you're constantly thinking about it and you're nervous, and that can cause your HRV to start to drop because that constant stress is weighing on you. It's on your nervous system. It's constantly giving you this low stress hum. Versus maybe something physical, could be if you're overtraining, meaning you're training every day and it's high intensity, then your body's not getting enough recovery, then again, your HRV might be low. HRV has also been shown to indicate emotion regulation, decision making, and even attention. So why should you care about HRV? Well, studies actually have shown that having a low HRV is actually quite correlated to having cardiovascular disease and even cancer. HRV has actually become quite popular nowadays because it's quite easy to measure. Any wearables now, like a Fitbit or a Polar or even an Apple Watch, can easily calculate an HRV, and you can just look at it in your phone or your watch. Studies do show that having a very low HRV of less than 15 milliseconds can actually be an indication of high risk of cardiovascular disease. However, having a very high HRV doesn't necessarily mean that you're actually healthier than the majority. It just means that you don't want to be below 15 milliseconds. Being average and above average doesn't give you any other benefits. So in the end, the focus point here is that you don't want an HRV below 15 milliseconds. Okay, so what can you do about it? HRV is actually known to be quite genetically influenced, meaning that 40 to 50% of your HRV is actually completely dependent on your genes. And so this actually means that the absolute number of your HRV is not as important as an indication of how certain lifestyle choices that you make can actually impact your health. So it doesn't really make sense to compare your HRV with someone else's. And that's like comparing your weight with somebody else's weight. Well, you don't really know whether that's good or bad. Rather, it's a better actual indicator to see the trend of your lifestyle, to see if certain actions that you take, for example, your sleeping habits, your eating and exercise, will impact your health. by looking at the trend of your HRV, the pattern. Here's an example of my HRV line over the last few months. During the Shanghai lockdown, you can actually see a spike in my HRV, and that's actually because I've been well rested. We got lots of sleep. We were even doing a lot of exercises at home, and so you can see that because of my well rested and my healthier lifestyle daily habits, there's a little spike in my graph. And then of course it comes back down to what is more of my normal day-to-day life. Here are some things that can actually negatively impact your HRV. There's alcohol, there's inactivity, bad sleep, bad nutrition, high heart rate and high blood pressure, also just overall stress in general, and your age. As we get older, your HRV will also decline. So you always have to consider what your age is in relative to your HRV. So you can refer to this graph as to see what is the normal ranges of HRV at certain different parts of your life. According to the research, HRV is a useful metric, but it's not as powerful as what some people may say. It's really important to know how you're doing mentally and physically, but just know that it's not the number that will explain everything about your health. It's still a very useful metric to track the trends of your lifestyle decisions. So that's it, guys. I hope you found that useful. As always, please leave any questions or comments below, and I'll see you next time.